We'll start up then. So, everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. Welcome to Workit Health's second community panel titled Black Voices in Recovery. My name is Chelsea, and I'm a recovery coach and a licensed social worker under Workit Health in New Jersey. Today, we're going to talk with our panelists about staying sober in stressful times, how race affects recovery, and their visions for a better future. First, let's have our panelists introduce themselves. So I'm just going to go from the right. Nyla, could you introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chelsea. And thank you, Callie, for coordinating this. And thank you to Workit Health. My name is Nyla Christian. My personal brand is Life Inspired. I also do recovery coaching, Chelsea. So I understand what the day has been like, especially in these times. I am a certified interventionist. I'm a life recovery coach. And I'm actually a certified peer specialist as well in the state of Nevada. I'm a member of NADAC. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is I have a life that I recognize and I respect and I dig. I am active in my recovery community. I am a mother of 3 21-year-olds and a husband and a cat. So I'm kind of on vacation today, as a matter of fact, escaping from all the testosterone. But hi, guys. I'm here to support the panel.
Thanks, Nyla. Chris, you're next.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Marshall. I live in Austin, Texas. Prior to becoming the owner and founder of Sands Bar, I was a substance use counselor. So yes, Chelsea, I do understand that long day that you had. I left the field after seeing that there was a real gap in the market and how we prepare people and individuals for life outside of treatment, and created Sands Bar, a way for people to connect and feel included in the social space without drugs or alcohol present. And I've been doing that since 2017. Prior to COVID, we were on a 15-city tour this year. So it's been a really cool experience that I've been able to take some of my clinical experience and put it into a experience. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. I've been sober since 2007.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Frederick, you're next.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Frederick Shegog. It's an absolute honor and blessing to be here. I'm very grateful, and I thank you for this panel. Thank you to Workit Health. Thank you to Callie. It's been a blessing working with you. Thank you to all the panelists that are on here as well. My name is Frederick Shegog. I am a person in long-term recovery. I have 4 years of sobriety by the grace of God. I am a graduate of Delaware County Community College. I will be finishing on a full ride my bachelor's at Westchester University this fall. I also am the owner of The Message LLC, which is a motivational speaking company that I travel to conferences, high schools, and colleges, and I specialize in speaking on mental health and substance use disorder. Bottom line, I'm trying to be about the change to save this next generation. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. And one person is saying you're still cutting in and out, so make sure you keep that face close to your computer, yes. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. So let's go ahead with this discussion. So we're in the midst of 2 different crises going on simultaneously, COVID-19 pandemic and the racial injustice going on in America. And it can be a lot to handle both at once. So first off, how have your recoveries been affected by COVID-19? Anyone want to jump in? You can raise your hand when you want to answer.
Go first.
Okay.
So for me, one of the things I had to realize early with COVID is that the everyday meetings, working out, the toolbox that I've been given, that was all for when rubber has to meet the road. It's not for when the good times, it's for when the times get hard, right? So for me, one of the things that I've made sure to stay on top of was I just dug deeper. And I said to myself, well, if every day I work on my health, is it for when times are good or is it for when times are hard? It's for when times are hard, right? I know that having a platform to speak to the youth, I must show that, especially in the times of dire. So for me, it was a lot of digging out and realizing what do I want COVID to look like when it's over, because it will end. The question is, how do I want to use this time? Do I want it to be used to where I'm crying, or do I want it to be used in a time of solution? So for me, I focused on the things that I can control. And what I can control is my behaviors. So I've been focusing a lot on writing, a lot on reading. I've been focusing a whole lot on helping others, volunteer work, and those things. So that's how COVID has really done for me.
Okay. Krista, do you want to add something?
I'll let Nyla go ahead and take this one.
Is that because you have a loved one in the background, Chris? I got it. So I'll jump in. Thanks so much for that, Frederick. I appreciate that. And it's a really pertinent question. You know, I have been sober going on 13 years. And I have to tell you guys, prior to my moment of clarity, my life was a pandemic. So technically, I think that people in recovery are actually better suited for this. We're better suited for this disaster. We're better suited for the opportunity to step up and be resilient. I love what Frederick said about utilizing this time, like maximizing the space that we have to do what? To grow, right? To grow, to better be able to convey a message of hope and of strength. You know, what a platform that we are equipped. We're equipped and even chosen. I honestly believe we're equipped and even chosen to stay sober, to stay clear, and to stay grounded in this type of climate. So yes, of course it's affected our recovery. You have to double down, you know, and I've doubled down. The first thing I did is I brought together my lineage of women that I work with, and I sponsor and they sponsor, and we started getting down into the work, right? Because what we're here to do is we're here to reach our hands out to the girl on the other side of the door. And the door right now, you know, it's tough. There are people, we're losing people in recovery to this despair and the distraction and the detachment. And so I've had to double down. I've had to double down. And it's intense, right? Imagine it's intense for us. Imagine how intense it is for people who don't have any resources, any spiritual resources. So it's been interesting, but I feel all the more blessed, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I have to piggyback off of what Nyla said. I agree. This is an opportunity for me to use everything all the tools I picked up over the last 13 years, one day at a time. This is the big opportunity to use all of them. And that's exactly what I've been doing, is going back to those very early things I did just in those very first 30 or 60 days of my recovery. I just have gone back to connecting to people, not isolating, and building community and leaning on that community. That is what I've spent all of this time doing. And it has served me so well. I agree that we were built for hard things, and a pandemic is a hard thing. Social unrest is a hard thing, and we can do hard things. And this is exactly what this moment calls for. And so I find it really amazing that I'm watching people in long-term recovery and people just new to recovery navigating this with the clear eyes and full hearts, and just they're not running away from this experience because we know how to do this hard thing in this hard moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So how has the Black community been disproportionately affected by COVID-19?
Okay, gentlemen, I'm jumping in. Chelsea, you know, it's an interesting question. I appreciate the verbiage, disproportionately affected. It seems that disproportionately affected is a pretty familiar phrase for communities of color, whether it be the recession, whether it be unemployment, whether it be proper health care, drinkable water, you know. I mean, so it's a familiar phrase, and it's unfortunate that it is. I think that we hear tell of less access to resources and so on and so forth. And I think, again, unfortunately, as a person of color, I'm used to being disproportionately affected in numbers exponentially by whatever it is that affects our community, our country, our culture. So it's an unfortunate thing, but I do believe that there, of course, has been less access to resources and such. And culturally, I believe that information for less access to resources, also information in terms of how to best care for ourselves and how to best care for our families. I think that it's on us who are kind of bearers of light to reach our hands out further and deeper into the community to help. I see you shaking your head, Chris. You want to pick up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The idea that being disproportionately affected is a new thing is just completely false. I mean, that's just what this has always been for us. This experience, when I say us, I mean people of color in this country. Our experience has always been being disproportionately affected. And I feel like this pandemic has not caused anything. It's only exposed and magnified what was already there. And these are generational problems that we've seen happen over and over and over again. There's like this health disparity that's just widened over time. And now those chickens have come home to roost. And we are seeing how not having access to healthcare and Black pain not being acknowledged by medical professionals is now, creating a problem where people are dying when they don't have to or really need to, right? The pandemic created none of these problems. It only exposed what was there. And I really do believe that for the entire world, this is a bottom. We're treatment professionals here. We can use that vernacular. This is a bottom. This is a bottom when we are realizing the unmanageability of our healthcare system. So I really agree with Nyla, just right on point. I just had to pick that up right up because I agree that this is exposing what was already a systemic issue.
Piggyback on these wonderful comments. I find it sad that we're having this conversation in 2020. I find it unbelievable because everybody told me that once Obama got in office that these problems were solved. Right? That's what I heard a lot from the community, that Obama's here, so we're making changes and things are better. Sounds good, because what I see is a microcosm of what's been going on in America. And you guys are right. Continual issue that not only are we not addressing the problem, but if we were behind the 8 ball before COVID, how could COVID possibly help?
Hold on, Frederick, hold on. Can you put your mic like close to your mouth while you're speaking? Maybe that would help.
All right, what about now?
Yeah, sounds good now. Continue, sorry.
So that's okay. Welcome to 2020 technology. No, what I was saying is that before COVID, we were already behind the 8 ball. Because the problem is funding and the people in positions of power don't fund the places and the people that need it. So the resources aren't readily as available as they are to other people. So we're already behind the 8 ball before COVID hits. Now, once COVID hits, it makes us double behind the 8 ball. And then we're thrown into situations like, well, why can't you be better? Why can't you make better moves? Well, it's because I don't have access to the things you have access to. Now, I'm blessed to have an education. I have a home of support. I have people in my network that empower me. What about the kids that ain't coming from that? What about the kids that don't have a mother with a degree that I came from? What about the kids that don't have good food at home, that doesn't have people around him empowering him? I think the problem is America is so worried about putting what they call the winners in the front. We need to start putting the people that don't have those resources in the front because they matter too. So I just think the pandemic, like you guys said, just expose what's already been going on. And that's systemic racism for the last 400 years.
I totally agree, Frederick. Due to the systemic racism in this country, I feel like a lot of people of color, specifically Black people, are put in, low-income areas and in low-income salary jobs where there have to be, the essential employees during the pandemic, and then they're exposed to getting the transmission of the virus. So that's also another reason why. And then when there's a lack of healthcare resources, of course, there's going to be higher rates of death as well.
Absolutely. I live in Austin, Texas, where there's about a 6% Black population here. So it's weird, or it's been interesting to see how many Black and brown faces occupy those essential jobs. I mean, it really brought to light just how Black and brown bodies are really on the front line of serving the people's needs. It's been a really interesting experience to realize that I'm seeing much more Black and brown faces in essential jobs than I have ever before living in Austin.
Right. Okay, next question. So we're gonna transition into the war on drugs. The drug war disproportionately affects Black people as well. How much does this inequality and consequences for drug use affect opportunities for recovery?
Can you repeat that one more time, Chelsea? The end of that, please.
Oh, the end part.
Yeah,
How much does this inequality and consequences for drug use affect opportunities for recovery for Black people?
Chris, I'm wrapping my head around it. It's a multifaceted, like there's a lot there.
Oh, there's so much. Oh,
yeah.
There's even unpacked just in the idea of it being a war on drugs, right?
Let's start there. Yeah, let's start there.
Like there's so much, we could spend a whole hour talking about just how that is not the case. It's not a war on drugs, it's a war on people. And it always has been a war on people, and people of color especially. I just think that how you find yourself in recovery is largely predicated upon what you did before you got here. So if you found yourself in legal trouble, you're more apt to find the more traditional means of recovery. Whereas if you didn't get into legal trouble, or you had opportunities to have education, other experiences, you're able to have access to non-traditional recovery. So I think when you criminalize certain drugs and you give harsher sentences for certain substances, all those things set up this chasm where access to traditional means are really the only viable way forward for a lot of people.
I thank you for setting the stage there, Chris, because there's so much to unpack, right? The first thing that comes to mind when you say the war on drugs is I think of growing up. Well, I'm going to give myself away. I think of growing up during the 80s, right? I think of growing up during the 80s and 90s and watching ashy, chapped-lipped, barefoot crack addicts paraded across televisions, and the advent of media so outraged by the plethora of crack babies and the crack epidemic and the war on drugs and the war on these people and the war on, and everything that you saw was Black and brown. And then I think to myself, it's interesting because suddenly we have a crisis. Not an epidemic, it's a crisis, because apparently the concept of addiction has changed zip codes. So now what we have is law enforcement assisted diversion tactics. And now we have intervention, the series. And now we have drug courts. And we have a very, very different approach to the same exact no respecter that we had before, right? So now we have this interesting approach where we want to help people, and addiction and alcoholism are destroying communities where people of color were destroying our community before. So it's a very different take on what's going on to begin with. Someone just talked about cops. Thank you. Cops versus the show Intervention, so that's interesting. But also you said something very interesting, Chris, that I want to talk about: access to recovery. Access to recovery is very interesting. So, we could sum it up very quickly and say, Black people go to jail, and other people go to treatment. You know, other people get treatment, treatment-assisted diversion. People get drug court. So it's an interesting thing how, again, criminalizing certain drugs, criminalizing certain crimes in the media, right? And so it's an interesting take to sit back now in recovery and be part of the recovery advocacy movement. Suddenly recovery is the new black and everyone is coming out and being recovered and so on and so forth, when it was something, first of all, that was hidden before, and second of all, if you were black and you had a problem, the world had a problem with you. Now, if you have a problem and your skin is other than melanated, we want to help you and we want to normalize. We want to normalize it now. So it's an interesting thing to carry that with me into recovery and figure out how I can access the resources, access the funds, access the programs to continue to take care of the people of color who don't have regular access to them.
Wow. So a lot to unpack here, right? But let me just say this. First of all, forgive me for the technical difficulties. I'm back. Number one, it is absolutely criminal that in the 80s, how many black and brown children were not raised by both of their parents because of these laws? Okay, that's number one. How many single parent homes was done because of this, which automatically sets them at a disadvantage? Number two, when you come home, as you guys know, when you come from an institution and you have that felony on your record, that makes life harder, right? Number three, what I don't understand and just boggles my mind is that I speak in treatment centers, and I can tell you the treatment centers I speak in, the majority of the kids in this treatment center are 95% Caucasian. So you mean to tell me that in 2020, it's important that we make sure these Caucasian and children are taken care of, but in 1980, the black and brown children's fathers and parents and mothers, they weren't good enough. Because then it was criminal, but now it's so we need treatment. I can't believe that racism doesn't even get checked at the door over health. It's unbelievable. And then when you set these programs up, you don't even put people in power that look like them. You're expecting these people to get better, and in these treatment centers, you don't even have counselors and people of power that are people of color. Where's the oversight? Where's HR doing? What do you mean that you got people in here that don't look like me? I've been to many treatment centers, and I can tell you I've been to some treatment centers, and not one of those people who were doing me look like me. What are you doing? It really speaks to how far America has to go, and it also speaks to the fact that that's why voting is important, because we got to make sure the people sitting in these positions will think about everybody and not just themselves.
Snaps to that. Voting definitely helps, because then getting the people in power, you know, on your side, making policies and laws to pass to benefit all Americans, just not a certain kind of American. Definitely. So piggybacking off of that and how there's like a disproportionate amount of white people in recovery and in the treatment centers, why is it that the recovery movement is so dominated by white people in recovery? And how can we work to elevate the voices of Black people in recovery?
Nyla, I know you want to take this. Sister, let me get this and I'll let you go. Okay, so my word I'm using is criminal because I believe, here's the problem. Number one, I learned real early in life, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So like, we have to have policy and oversight because I don't trust the system, because I've seen that the institution without oversight, without policy, will run amok, right? What bothers me is we're good enough to be represented in your jails and to build your jails, but we're not good enough to help nobody get better. Really? So we're good enough to be the population in these jail systems, and we're good enough to be on parole. We're good enough to be in probation. We're good enough to have somebody watching us, but we're not good enough to be at the head of a recovery system where we're helping our people get better? What is that? I think one of the issues is too is that in these rooms, they don't want to elevate our voices. I think a lot of it is, and I hate to go like this, Yes, master. I thank you for what you've given me. I don't want no problems. I'm okay with this cornbread. And I hate to go that route. But that's what I see. I think that it's take this bone and be happy I gave you this because you don't have to even be in here. Be lucky I gave you this. It's a lot of 40 acres and a mule mentality as far as I'm concerned. But that's just my opinion.
I'm jumping in, Chris. Would you like to jump in first? And I can sum up.
Look, Frederick is coming in clear now, and I love it. That's all.
Sure enough.
I'm just sitting back and just taking notes because Frederick is telling the truth. But no, I think one thing that we have to realize and respect is that Black people and people identify as Black or African American are in the minority just population-wise. There's just less of us out here than there are white people, right? And so I think because that is the case, and because racism is not accidental, it's intentional. And I think that's something that we were talking about earlier, that this system is not an accident that it happens this way. It is actually the way that this has been set up since the beginning of the founding of this country, right? So while we acknowledge that Black and brown people don't make up a majority of this country, it is incumbent upon us to make ourselves present in those places. And I think that's where voting comes in. I think that's where calling things out when we see that there's a disparity there. We have to put ourselves in there. I think that there was such a great intention a month ago to everyone's blacking out their social media and amplifying melanated voices, and I think that was great. I think that we shouldn't have to wait on white folks to amplify our own voices, because if we wait on that, we'll be waiting forever. Right? It's not going to happen until we decide that we are going to create our own microphone and create our own sound system and amplify and elevate our own voices. I think that is, yes, the system is broken, messed up, and it needs to be demolished and rebuilt. But I do believe that a lot of this is incumbent upon us to make our voices known. And that's what I've been doing on my social media. I'm really working to use my own voice, which is something that has been a real transition for me as a brand.
I appreciate the accountability, Chris. You know, my personal brand is Life Inspired, and I also try to carry not only a message of experience, strength, and hope that, you know, for those of us that have a 12-step background, but I also try to carry the message that people of color do recover. And what I mean by that is that there is a disparity, and you said a couple of things, Chelsea, and I want to kind of cover these. That's why I was waiting to hear you guys, but I want to kind of cover them, so I've taken a few notes. We talked about inequality in the recovery advocacy movement, and I want to talk about that. Lack of representation. You know, in 2015, I went to DC, the March on Washington, Unite to Face Addiction, and there were thousands of people. And I could count on a few hands and toes the amount of brown and Black faces that I saw. And it was appalling to me. And it was appalling to me on a lot of different levels. You said something interesting. One, I do not believe that the information, I don't think that there was a concerted effort by the general media or by the general community, meaning the general recovery community, to reach people of color, first of all. That's number one. But I also believe, Chris, that there's an accountability, and which is why I needed to be there. Right? I think that there's an accountability on my part. I'm an empowered woman in recovery, which means, what do? I reach in, I lean into recovery. I lean into the learning. I lean into the access to resources so that I can then be the conduit for the girl on the other side of the door. So I think that there's an accountability that we cannot leave out, but I also think that there's a concerted effort. I tell you, I got sober in Las Vegas, and you know, it's the advent of the Recovery Community Organization, the RCO. SAMHSA is very hot, or was hot at a time, on creating these recovery community organizations specifically to create a continuity in recovery. So we're talking about end to end. We're talking about as soon as I declare and I decide that I want to be recovered or I want to recover from addiction, what's the opportunity? Where are the opportunities that we have to intervene as a recovery community and support this person? That's where recovery coaching and all that kind of stuff comes in. You know, all the way through to somebody transitioning into their life. So, you know, the recovery community organization technically is a pretty strong and pretty viable organization for our community, especially the recovery community. And SAMHSA, by the way, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association, for the person that just asked that. It's a government association. But the interesting thing about it, in this recovery community organization, which was built to serve the community of recovering people, there was no representation of anyone of color. And the only opportunity that I was ever given, when I did ask for the opportunity as well, to be part of not only the, not so much of the creation of the community, but part of being the conduit for the organization to the community. The only time I was ever asked and my services were utilized is when I could dance across the stage for them. So as long as I'm entertaining, that's fine. But in terms of me being part of policy and power, in terms of me being part of implementing action in the community, there was absolutely a concerted effort for me not to be part of that. And it took me years doing a lot of things for free and for fun in order to understand, and everybody's shaking their head. It took a lot of years for me to understand that. Now I continue to be of service because that's what I'm here to do. So in terms of the recovery advocacy movement, 2015 Unite to Face Addiction, recovery community organizations, where are we? Where are we? I know probably of one, maybe two recovery advocates who are national advocates that speak on national platforms, maybe two, okay? Third, Addiction Policy Forum went in 2017 to the Hill to advocate for some of the CARA Act. And again, I could count on one hand the amount of faces of color that I saw. And when I say faces of color, I mean people of color. And I could count on two fingers the Black advocates that I saw. And I thought, again, that's interesting because I'm pretty sure we suffer from addiction. I'm pretty sure we recover from addiction. But it seems that for some strange reason, we're no longer considered as part of the forefront of the movement of furthering the cause of recovery. And I think that that's very interesting. And Chris, I agree. We're accountable to change that. I'm not here to ask for a seat at the table. I'm here possibly to serve my own dinner if I need to. Hey, Frederick. I knew Frederick was gonna love that.
Yes.
I will get your number and call you.
Frederick, I knew you were gonna dig that, man. Are we waiting for Chelsea?
All right. Next
there's
question. Mental health viewed and treated differently. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, my internet says it was unstable. You can hear me now, though, right? Okay. It says, how is addiction recovery and mental health viewed and treated differently in Black culture than in white culture?
Frederick.
Yes.
I could give ideas. I mean,
I was gonna say, go ahead, Chelsea, please.
I feel like a lot of people, especially African Americans, there's definitely a stigma in general for getting treatment and getting therapy. But I feel with African Americans, I think it's even more, and that their form of therapy is going to the Black church and praying. And granted, yes, having spirituality and prayer is helpful for a lot of people, but the Bible doesn't teach relapse prevention. It doesn't teach self-care, so certain things that you could learn in church, yeah, they could benefit you, but it's not going to be psychoeducation in your recovery. So I think that's where the differences lie.
Chelsea, I'm going to jump in there on that and say, you know what, I think it's interesting that the post and present traumatic stress disorder of being Black in America. I believe one of the things that has become a cultural myth for us is that we can take it. Like we can do it, and especially Black women, we traditionally don't seek mental health support. We traditionally you don't find, and I can't say that this is wholesale, but traditionally or historically you didn't find us in yoga classes and meditation retreats and stuff like that, because we have been taught to take it and it's going to be okay. And I think that it has created a situation for us culturally. And I'll say that it's slightly a self-imposed crisis in the sense that it is, there's a stigma. There's a stigma associated with getting help. There's a stigma associated with with seeing a psychiatrist or a therapist. And then the aftermath of that is there is a stigma, of course, associated with, old drunk Aunt Mamie or whoever it is. There's a stigma associated with that where we hide her away somewhere because she's shameful, because it's a moral failing. So I think that we suffer from the same type of interpretation that the larger community suffers from, but I think that it's exacerbated because of some of the other cultural challenges that we have that are self-imposed and some are imposed by a community.
I definitely, this hits home for me. I was raised in a single parent home with a mother who'll celebrate 26 years in sobriety in September. Mental health has been an issue in her whole life. And I'm gonna just say from a family standpoint, in the world in general, stigma outweighs education. For some reason, people will ignore the stats, the books, the research over their own biases. And I just know in my own family, and from where I come from, it's a church background. So when they look at things, they look at it through the prism of Jesus and they look at it through the prism of the Bible. While I believe that God can help, and I'm a Christian, I also believe that God made people, and some of them people became doctors that made medication. And some of them people were smart enough to help us. I believe that if I'm sick, my life should be based on a cycle of health. God wouldn't want me not seeking the treatment I need just because I think there might be a stigma. That doesn't make sense. That's not being diligent. That's not using the brain that he's given me. As a human being, he's blessed me with a mind that when I need help, I'm going to go seek that. And I know in my own family, I had an uncle who has Parkinson's disease, and by God's grace, he's lived with that. But I saw the way that he was embraced. But my mother didn't get that same embracement because hers was mental illness. And see, the thing about mental illness is you can't see mental illness. You can see Parkinson's. You can see physical illnesses. And unfortunately, people will stigmatize and say, and I'm sure people have heard this, ain't nothing wrong with you. You all right. Because I think part of it is we feel like we're so much behind the 8 ball, we can't have another 8 ball at the table. We can't be in a situation where we got to fight poverty, we got to fight injustice, we got to fight not being accepted. And now on top of that, you mean to tell me we got mental illness? Like you said, Nyla, man, we'll be all right, we'll get over that. And let's be real. It's almost cool and common to have a beer with your uncle or with your dad. That's almost normal. I just came up in a household where we didn't do that with my parents. But in America in general, it's not cool to be a man and sit down and talk about your feelings and how medication you take and talk about how you're going through stuff and life is sad. That's not the America we're built in. We're built in for tough. We're built in, you got to be this. So the fact that you would sit at Sunday dinner table and say, hey, I got out of a treatment facility. Hey, I need to go to a mental health institution. I don't know about anybody else's family, but I know in mine, when I was growing up, if you'd have sat at a Sunday dinner table, that took gall. And I just think that until we start changing those generational cycles of thinking, we're going to be at the same place.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of this is internal, but a lot of this is also external too. I think just back to the idea of Black pain and people not believing Black pain and why Black women have higher mortality rates when they give birth or get elective procedures. It's because Black pain is not believed. And so if our world outside does not believe or accept or acknowledge Black pain, then how hard is it to internally as a community acknowledge that pain? I think there's a lot there than just saying we just don't accept it and that's just the way it always is. I think it's important to look at the origin of that. I think the origin, again, is a system that discounted pain. I mean, can you imagine? Coming out of bondage and coming out of Jim Crow and segregation and all the trauma, all the generational trauma that we carry. When were non-Black people ever gonna start believing Black pain? When was that ever gonna happen? when was that going to be? It was never going to happen, right? That is incumbent up, again, that's the part that's incumbent upon us to acknowledge and accept. My own personal experience is I live with diagnoses of mental health disorders, major depression and anxiety, with my substance use disorder. And it was a big thing in my family to talk to them about mental illness. My father, God rest his soul, passed away last year, but he struggled his whole life with schizophrenia. And so I was able to, and actually in a way, his mental illness, because it was so big, it helped my family to understand that mental illness, like to Frederick's point, was something that you cannot see, and how it changes and shapes people and separates you from culture and from family. I, for the longest time in my life, did not understand my father or his mental illness, but I am so grateful that he was able to show my family the need for therapy, the need for using modalities that aren't traditionally offered, right? All those things were because of, the person in my life that's closest to me that had mental illness. So my hope is, and I think that's something that we don't talk enough about in panels like this. We don't talk enough about hope, enough about joy. We talk a lot about pain, about affliction. We talk a lot about systemic racism. We don't talk enough about hope and joy. And so the hope that I have is that for the next generation, we are able to destigmatize mental illness and destigmatize pain. That we can, as people of color, experience pain, and that pain is real, and that pain can be treated. That is what I really hope for the next generation.
Thank you, Chris. Next question. So in a recent article from Workit Health, we discussed lack of representation of people of color in the 12-step community and the phenomenon of Black meetings and white meetings. A newcomer to the 12-step who has experienced this disparity said in the article, "White privilege affects no one more than the newcomer. Does white privilege in recovery support groups prevent Black people struggling with addiction from receiving the help that they need? And what can all of us do to address these inequalities?"
Well, I know from my experience, absolutely. Now, to be very clear, my first meetings were in 3rd grade when my mom got sober. I've been going to meetings, I'll be 38 this year. I've been going to meetings that long in my life. Do the math. And what I have seen that bothers my soul is that what are we doing with Black and white meetings? That's number one. We're all fighting the same illness, which is trying to kill us. Okay? Number two, absolutely, I know that there's a hierarchy to this, because first of all, if I'm in a meeting and I don't see anybody that looks like me and that is empowered and that is actually given it a voice, how can you expect me to trust somebody in here as a sponsor and to guide me through and to put me through steps where I'm going to tell you my personal pains and things that I've been through? And on top of that, what I've noticed is if I do trust one of y'all, I've heard this, he's one of the good ones. What is that? Right? Because now, and then what happens is I start getting mad at the people that look like me that start hanging out with them, because that tells me that you're suspect, because you see that this is going on, but you're not doing nothing about this. And to Chris's point when he brought up the youth, what bothers me is the next generation sees this, because now we got newcomers coming into meetings and they're already trying to fight what they're up against, and they got to worry about this part too. We got to be better than this. So yeah, I totally, that's my experience.
Chris, I'm going to let you jump in, and you want to jump in, or what do you want to do? You want to jump in?
From you, I'm interested in what you have to say here.
I'm interested in what you guys have to say too. I'm always the only one in the room. I'll just start there. I'm always the only one in the room. And I say that to mean this. I got sober in Las Vegas, and I got sober amongst an organization of women that had been in the community, deep down in community, in recovery for decades, literally decades. And I walk in the door, and there's these cool, I'm a New Yorker, right? So, I think I'm all that. And I walk in the room, and there's these women there, and they're tough, man. you know, and they're tough, and they need to be tough for me, right? They need to be tough in order for me to hear that message. And I made friends with this. She had probably 50 some odd years recovery when she did transition. But long story short, I remember very clearly her in her transitioning days. She grabbed me close to her. She was in a wheelchair, and she grabbed me close to her. And she was senile at the time, so she would have these moments of clarity, right? And in this moment of clarity, she grabbed me and she pulled me down to her and she whispered in my ear, "You need to stay because the Black girls are going to need you." And I remember thinking to myself, and prior to that, you know, I had already begun to formulate an idea. You know, you look around and I'm the only one in the room unless I go over there. And then when I go over there, I'm wondering why we're not over here too, right? Like what's the problem? Where's the integration? Why is there no interfacing? It's because there is sort of an unspoken rule, right? There's an unspoken rule in the rooms. Your Blackness is not part of this. It's an outside issue. And I see you laughing, Freddie, right? So my deal is, so when I can jump up out of this skin, right, and be outside of my skin, that's when my Blackness will become an outside issue. The interesting thing is that when you're in the rooms and you're sharing your experience, strength, and hope, which part of your experience is your experience, part of your experience is your trauma. You're sharing your trauma, and your trauma can be domestic violence, your trauma can be incest, your trauma can be poverty, but your trauma can't be Black. Because if your trauma is Black, you get a drive-by after the meeting from one of the trusted elders that tell you that there's some things that we don't discuss, and that race is somehow a politicized issue. No, race is just a living issue. That's what race is. It's a living issue, and to be Black in America is traumatic. And I'll be darned if it has not been part of my experience. It's been woven into my fabric. You know, I love when Claudine Rankin in Citizen talks about the microaggressions that are compiled as I grow. There is an accumulation of microaggressions that become part of the trauma that I've suffered, and part of the reason that I look to numb. You know, I grew up as one of those girls that went to school with Biffy and Buffy, but I grew up with my homeboys in Harlem. And the dichotomy of growing up between those two worlds caused a fracturing that is part of my trauma. It is part of my pain. It's part of what I drank on. It's part of what I tried to escape from, that trauma. But I was told very silently, because they don't tell me, but they don't tell me. But there is a silent sort of scorn. If you are in a room, you have the opportunity to share your experience, strength, of hope. And what I love what you said, Chris, I love what you said about exposing Black pain. See, my Blackness is not supposed to be part of the pain that I expose when I'm in the rooms, because you know why? Because it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you uncomfortable to realize that I have been the victim of your complicit bias. I have been the victim of your silence. I've been the victim of your privilege. And it's not about claiming victimization. It's about, for some strange reason, that's a part of my experience that seems to make everyone in the room without melanin extremely tight. And I would like to get to a point where when I'm the only one in the room, because I'm the only one in the room, and another person of color and another Black woman walks in the room, I can not only welcome her into the room, but I can tell her it's a safe place to be exactly who she is, to share exactly what she needs to share, and that she needs not to be ashamed of feeling inadequate or less than or other than or being otherized. Like, she does not have to feel that it's not a safe place to do that. Why isn't it a safe place for us? Why are we in the meetings over there? Is that a question? Should we be asking our trusted servants? Should we be asking our elders, our elder statesmen in our meetings? Why are there separate meetings? So I think that as a recovery community, it's incumbent upon us to start asking questions and then creating some action around it. We're an action community, right, Chris? Chris talked about hope. So if we're a community that's geared towards and leans into action, then why don't we lean into action around this? Just because it makes a few of us uncomfortable, right? So thank you. I was looking at the question that came up there, or the comment.
Yeah, I've been watching some of the comments as well, and I do think it's worth mentioning in this conversation and always, that we're not just talking about one way of having the Black experience. I think there's so much intersectionality that we have to acknowledge. The LGBTQIA plus experience in this country, being a person of color, is a whole other dimension and dynamic to this. And so I think that that conversation is something that I've just been so interested in, just finding out those intersectionalities. I can't say much more than what Frederick and Nyla have already said, but I will add this piece to it. I think that some of it is about the consolidation of Black energy. Because of all those things, because of microaggressions, because of not feeling safe in the rooms, because there is not a platform for you to feel like you can talk about your Black trauma, there's a consolidation of Black energy. And what I know about being Black, because I've been Black most of my life, is there's something different when a couple of Black people are together. There is an energy that is undescribable. It's beautiful. There's a flow, there's a form to it, there's a function to it. And sometimes I need to be in a space where I'm free to be all of that. So yes, forced segregation is absolutely wrong. Again, part of the system and not okay. But is it important to have a space where I don't have to leave my Blackness at the door? I can walk right into with my skin, and I can be all in and sit all the way down, as the old timers used to tell me to sit all the way down. When I can do that, it's when I grow. But maybe I need to be around people who look like me and have shared my experiences to have that freedom. So, I understand that there's Black meetings and white meetings, but I also understand that there's a need for Black meetings sometimes, if that makes sense.
Chris, real quickly, your point is great. And Nyla, I want to hit on something you said fastly. One of the things that I think we all need to be aware of is we all have that dog in us to fight, but we need to be real clear about the action piece. One thing I learned, everybody's about to protest till the rent's due, right? Like, it sounds really good, but we got to remember, everybody wasn't Harriet Tubman. Everybody wasn't Dr. King. Everybody didn't have that fight in them to when that fight meant their families might be in jeopardy. So there's a difference between saying I'm about the action to actually living that when it's going to make your life uncomfortable. That's what's the realness. Because as you know, Lyle, and as you know, Chris, there are going to be some that's going to step over the picket line. The question is, who won't? So I think it's real important when we talk about action, the people sitting at that table are really who are about that action and show that in their daily character, not just when it's an Instagram like.
I love that. Let's wrap in that social media. Thank you, Freddie. And I also just want to piggyback on Chris. I love what you're saying. It's obvious that meetings are oftentimes segregated because the climate is not welcoming. Absolutely, the climate is not welcoming. And that's, excuse me, for me personally, what I have experienced is that oftentimes the climate is not welcoming. And I often find that because I am who I am, it's quite welcoming to me, but it may not be to my brothers and sisters for various reasons, for a myriad of reasons, right? Because I can interface, right? Or seemingly on the outside, I know how to interface. But the interesting thing you said, Chris, is you know what? Sometimes I need to not check my Blackness at the door. I don't want to check my Blackness at the door. I want to unfold in it. I want to unravel in it. I want to be able to be welcomed and to be celebrated in it and to be heard and to be considered and to get the empathy and the sympathy and the understanding that I need in that moment. And oftentimes I will seek that out. But interesting, and I like the action too, Freddie. I like him. I like the action.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier in the discussion. Another area that lacks diversity is treatment professionals. How can we advocate for programs to hire more people of color in roles like recovery counselors and coaches?
I'll jump in. I know that I'll start from the recovery coach piece. You know, again, working with and through and in conjunction with a recovery community organization that was very, very, very comfortably less diverse than it should be. As I'm looking for the politically correct way to say that. You know, it's interesting because my comment or my nudging to them was, you know, that that Native Americans are recovering too. And there's some left-handed people, and there's a few people with stripes, you know, and there's a few people who, you know, have, you know, there's a few brown and a few yellow people. And what I was told is that, oh no, we represent a diverse section of the recovery community. And it dawned on me that obviously you seem to be under the impression that other people are not recovering. So again, I think it is a matter of accountability and a matter of that consolidated Black energy, like that, Chris, I'm gonna take that, right? But a matter of that consolidated Black energy stepping to the forefront and saying, you know, we need to not only be, you know, we're represented obviously as the end user, and we need to be represented as the person that supports us as well. So how do we advocate for that? We need to begin having more conversations like this in more venues like this and reaching out into the community, and asking for help. That's number one. We need to ask the professionals that are possibly not aware that we need them to support us more. So we need to definitely do that. And I think the other piece, Chelsea, is a cultural shift, right? It's a cultural shift because we talked about how wellness and well-being is not what we as African Americans culturally, as Black people culturally have sought out actively. So, and Frederick, I see you shaking your head because we were talking about your family. Yeah, that we need to culturally shift towards understanding not only do we need help, but we need credentialed professional help. And so we need to kind of gear ourselves culturally and mentally more towards being available for the people who need us.
So when you said this, I almost jumped out my skin because I'm gonna speak on the treatment piece. So I have been to at least 20 treatment centers, probably 20 psychs that I can remember. That's where my substance use disorder and my alcoholism, my untreated mental health takes me. And I can tell you my first counselor I probably had was 10. From that age until now, do you know how many counselors I've had who were people of color? And do you know how many doctors have prescribed me medication that were people of color? 1. And I've been to treatment from Western Pennsylvania all the way over to Philadelphia. That is absolutely criminal. Because what that tells me is, and in these treatment centers, right, dig this. You're good enough to be the pastor. You're good enough to be a tech to work in here. You're good enough to be the janitor. But you're not good enough to be in no positions of power. You're not good enough to be no counselor. You know what that is to me? A microcosm of America. Because when I look at Wall Street, all white. When I look at the school boards and the districts of people at the top, all white. And not only on top of all white, men. Let's be real here. When I look at all the presidents, it's been the same thing except Obama. And all these different institutions, all it is white Anglo-Saxon men. At what point? And what hurts me about treatment, don't you think if I'm sitting in a room and 9 out of 10 of these people in here are one race, they're all coming from the same background, why would you think if I'm a person that has low self-esteem, because when you use drugs and alcohol, you got to have low self-esteem because people that love themselves don't kill themselves. Why would you think that I would be in a room and I would share my deep, darkest secrets and deepest pain when nobody in here looks like me? And then on top of that, how is the counseling ironing her skills? How is she sharpening her tools when everybody she deals with all the time looks the same, comes from the same situation, come from the same background? And then on top of that, the people at the top, you know what that tells me? We're good enough to take your money, but you're not good enough to work here as a counselor. We're good enough to make sure your health insurance comes through, and we're going to get that change off of you. But you're not good enough to be in a position of power to help your own people. That's a microcosm of this country, man. And you would think that we'd be better than that in a place where we're dealing with health, where we're trying to save lives. But again, racism don't even get checked at the door for health. As long as they get their profit, and then what I'm noticing is profit over people, nothing changes. And how do we advocate? Simple. By having people like Brother Greg Williams, who's the filmmaker for the Anonymous People. He allowed me to asked me to keynote an event for an Alliance call where I sat in a room with change makers and policy makers who sit at the top of these boards and institutions where they're actually going to use my experience to make change. You got to have people that sit in those positions of power that don't look like me, but willing to empower my voice so that other people behind me will have one.
I just want to jump in really quickly. I know we're coming to the top of the hour, but I just want to just add my experience. I was a counselor for 8 years, and I worked with Black. It's just like that was my personal experience. I worked with plenty of Black and Hispanic counselors. I also realized that was intentional. Like that was by design. My employers saw the value in having a diverse staff, having a trans person on the staff, having someone who was a first generation Latinx individual. Those companies saw the value in that. So I count myself very fortunate, but do I know that what Frederick was talking about exists? Absolutely. And and that's why I stopped asking to be on board and stopped waiting for people to put me on board to start creating my own. Like I stopped asking for a spot at the seat, the table, and I started just building my own tables. I stopped asking to get onto your speeches and to get onto your things, and I create my own tour and I do my own thing. And I'm bringing along women with me and undocumented citizens of this country with me, and people that don't have money with me, and people that have mental illness and don't have the physical abilities that everyone else. I'm bringing them all with me because that is the promise that America was founded upon. So I just want to jump in and just say that, yeah, I mean, that's my experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So we have a couple more questions left, and then we'll segue into a Q&A to end it. So how important is it for Black people to see their experience reflected in the people helping them to get sober?
Personally, for me, I look at it like this. They always say, and I've heard you tell me, Freddie, because I speak in schools, and I've heard this be said to me, Freddie, all I grew up around was drug dealers. Of course I sell drugs. All I seen was people getting money. Of course that's what I wanted to do. You have to see what looks like you in order to believe that you can be that. That's why I started this company as speaking, because I wanted these kids in there to know, listen, you can be me and not me, be better than me and be you. You have to have something you can see to believe in it. The reason I believe in education is because I grew up with a single parent mother that graduated college, and I could see every day how hard she was working and what education could do. If I wouldn't have came from that, Lord knows where I'd be at. The reason I believe in church and being a Christian because I saw my granddad working in there and I saw what he did. So it made me want to be like that. And it's funny that muscle memory came. That's the life that I live today because of what I saw growing up. Studies have shown it's easier to be what you see. It's easier to become that. Why do you think kids want to be coaches like their dads? Why do you think kids want to be police officers like their dads? Why do you think there's women whose moms are teachers, they want to be like them? There's a reason. Because what they see, they actually can believe. Especially with children, they're sponges when they're young. What you see is what you believe. So I just think that for us not to realize that is absolutely just ridiculous, man. It is easy for me to want to go into education because I saw a mother that did education.
I have to agree to an extent. You know, I do think that children can only be what they see. At the same time, I think you also have the freedom and autonomy to pick your saints. You get to choose. You know, if Barack Obama was looking for a Black president who looked like him, he wouldn't have found one, right? If Trying to think of like, Charlie Pride. I mean, you could think of all these people that if you don't have anyone that looks like you, you have to look for people that have what you want, to borrow a phrase from the rooms, right? And so they may not look like you, but building my business, I looked at people who had what I wanted. I wanted to build a sober version of Starbucks, right? So I looked at Howard Schultz. He's not Black, but does he have what I want? Absolutely. So yes, I agree that children can only be what they see, but at some point, we have the privilege to choose our saints. We can choose who we want to be like, and we can go in those directions. So yeah, that's just my take on it. You can have both. You can be what you see, but you can also be something different.
Thank you for that, Chris. I'm gonna jump in here and say, I think it's a travesty that we have been taught that the Black experience is one-dimensional. Our experience is multidimensional, and what that means to me is that I just recently had an encounter with a young woman who it just so happens her experience is very much like mine. She grew up standing in the hallway in between worlds a lot. And that means that, sometimes she grew up in situations where she felt like she wasn't white enough, and she wasn't Black enough, and she wasn't this enough, or she wasn't that enough. And there were expectations on either side for her to be whatever caricature that particular community had created for that girl. So in other words, in one world, she was supposed to be Carlton. We all know who Carlton is, right? So in one world, she was supposed to be Carlton, and in case anybody doesn't know who Carlton is, I'm talking about Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? If we can remember that. Right, exactly, doing the dance, right? So in one world, she needed to be Carlton in order for the Caucasians to accept her and feel safe, and feel safe with her. In the other world, she needed to be, she needed to have a grill and long nails in order for her to be down with Pookie in them. And the bottom line is we have created these caricatures about the one-dimensional Black experience, which I think is a travesty. And I think that unfortunately, we're again, oftentimes internally not accountable for that, right? And so in saying that, I have this young woman, she comes in and she sees me and she hears me and I share deeply. When I speak, I'm much like you, Freddie, when I share and I speak, I share very deeply and very transparently. I'm not only unafraid of who I've been, but who I am. And so I get to do that, and I'm empowered to do that. And so when I speak my truth, I appeal to not all, but some. And this woman says to me, I didn't know I'd be able to say what you said out loud, that I didn't feel good enough in either world. That I've been expected to show up. The microaggression of being Black in America means you're expected to show up even in the rooms. Even in the rooms, you're expected to show up a certain way. If you're not speaking a certain way or speaking the other way, there's this uncomfortability. But when you show up, oh, here's a good one. You're so articulate. You're so eloquent. Oh, I'm sorry, what was I supposed to be? Or you show up in the room, hey, girlfriend. I'm sorry, what? What is that familiarity? Why do you think that you need to characterize some popularized version of what Black is in order to relate to me? Right, so there's this very interesting thing about being the only one in the room. Oftentimes being the only one in the room, and what that means. And Frederick, I love what you're saying, because you know what? When a Black woman shows up in the room, and I'm in the room, and I've been in the room a long time, and I've been empowered with experience and strength and hope, and I've been empowered with with a clear experience, and I'm able to convey that, and she can see me and she can connect to me. It is an experience, and I sponsor women of all shapes and sizes and colors and nationalities. But I can tell you guys, when a Black woman walks in and I'm standing there and she sees me, there is a light that connects us that is out of this world. And on the same hand, I have this absolutely fantastic sponsor who's very Caucasian, white woman from California that looks like a beach girl. Right? So the point is that recovery in and of itself is transferable, and it's transmutable, and it's conveyable. It doesn't matter, but there is something about that familiar experience, and something about that warmth that we have as brothers and sisters, that's immeasurable. It's immeasurable. So.
Thank you, Nyla. Last question before we go to the Q&A. What are the most important tools for you to take care of yourself, your mental health, and your recovery today?
Well, for me, and this has been great. This has just been, it's a blessing. For me, what I learned real early was my life had to be based on a cycle of health. So for me, and none of this is perfect. Let me be very clear about that. For me, it's mental, spiritual, physical. So it's the prayer life, the Bible, church, not just in attendance, but in actual footwork. Communication with being a family man, my wife, daughter. Also being present for my mother as a son, because I have a duty as a son, especially as an only son. Talking to her, being as supportive I can for her. It's also education for me. It's also having people around me that will tell me what I need to hear, not what I want, because if they love me, they will make sure I'm guided on a path. It's having a network that's empowering me, eating right, working out, that I do not do perfectly. It's reading, right? It's being a weapon of hope for me. And I really mean that, because as a speaker, it's an integrity job. And I can't give out hope, and I can't ask you to be the best version of yourself, and I'm on this platform and I'm not giving you that. So for me, it's a cycle of health that's based on different things that I can tap into at all times. That's what I do.
Mine's really simple, especially during this whole year of 2020. I've been working on using my voice. And that has been the best thing for my mental, physical, and emotional health. Yeah, all those things Frederick said are true. And as a family man, as someone that has a faith, all those things are true. But the living embodiment of all of those things for me is to use my voice. And so that manifests in writing, that manifests in getting on panels with my anxiety just raging and just doing it anyways, right? It is getting uncomfortable at 13 years of sobriety and saying I still struggle with these things. Using my voice is the best exercise of my mental, physical, and emotional health. And so just to echo what Freddie said, I gotta thank everyone for this opportunity, because this has been incredible. This has been outstanding. And thank you, Chelsea, for these excellent questions.
Chelsea, the question is, what do we use to take care of ourselves? Is that what you said?
Yeah, like self-care, managing your mental health and your recovery.
Managing mental health and recovery. Okay, so connection to my network. Cultivating a relationship with these women in my life that just rock, cultivating a relationship with people who tell me the truth when I don't want to hear it. Continuing to grow, staying open, willingness, literally being on the hunt for growth, peace, light, transformation, not picking up. Hey, let's get really, really simple about it, right? And not picking up in all forms, indulging in self-love, like actively indulging in self-love. There is something that Chris said that, intentional, where did I just see this? Intentional, like intentionally programming myself and orienting myself towards the light, intentionally doing that and having to do that and having to double down right about now too. There is a lot in the air. I have to tell you guys, with both the pandemic and the inevitable unrest of this country, because it was inevitable, right? But with all of that, there's a lot of, I feel exposed and prickly. And at 13 years, right, very, very vulnerable. So for me, another thing is transparency, honesty, to be transparent and honest about exactly where I am and being sure that I stay teachable. So that's what's worked for me thus far.
Awesome, guys. And for me, COVID-19 this entire time, 2020 in general has just been trying me and my mental health. But, I've been trying to manage it by being very self-focused, I work out every morning. During quarantine. Most people gained weight during quarantine, but I lost some. So I'm very happy about that. I was spending time with family and friends doing like Zoom calls. And now that things are slowly reopening in New Jersey, I'm going back outside, but being cautious, wearing a mask and everything, and spending time with loved ones. My job at Workit, giving back and helping other people still struggling. It's definitely uplifting to see, clients start out, testing positive for certain things, struggling with their mental health, but then working with them during the pandemic for these past few months. And then they go from like a weekly script to a monthly script of Suboxone, and their mental health is doing better. They're able to emotionally regulate better. It makes me feel good when they're feeling good. So that's what I'm doing for my mental health.
Chelsea, I just wanted to add this in, that one thing COVID has taught me is two things. Number one, the only thing guaranteed in life is change. And number two, health is wealth. Because no amount of money, no amount of car, degree, none of that could stop me from getting this virus if I didn't have health. So I think that's very important that I learned from this. If I don't have health, the bank account don't matter.
Any questions from the Q&A or in the, okay.
Can you see the Q&A, Chelsea? It looks like there's
there's a Q&A, but then there's also the chat. So there's one person in the Q&A that said, can you talk about the impact of oppression and colonization on trusting the medicalized systems of care?
I'll just say this simply, without big verbiage. If I'm sick, I'm going to go to an institution of a person that works there that went to medical school for 10 years. Ain't I supposed to be able to trust you? Didn't you take an oath to be a doctor? Ain't I supposed to be able to think that if I'm sickness, that it doesn't matter my race, creed, or religion, that you're going to help me when I need help? Because if not, what am I to do? Because if you leave it in my hands, ain't no telling what's going to happen. If we get to a point we got a society, I can't trust the medical institutions, you think my prayer list is long now? Can't have that.
I'm going to jump in and say that's literally an entire series. There's absolutely no way to cover that question in the next 38 seconds. But I will say the first thing that comes to my mind is I believe was Dr. Marion Sims who experimented on Black women in very, very invasive procedures, doing research on us without anesthesia. It has been baked into our culture to, first of all, to have a suspicion of the medical industry. So that's first of all. But I honestly, this is way more that we can cover now. But there was another question that I wanted to cover. There was someone that asked about. I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's a great.
So the next question was, as a white woman in recovery, what can I do to help bridge the gap?
And I'm in. Let me jump in, right? Chris, I got you. Let me jump in there. To bridge the gap, do the work, right? Do the work. And Dawn said it too, Dawn Nickel, do the work, right? And what that means is there are basic foundational pieces that you need to do, that you need to seek, that you need to read. There are ways, there are actions that you can take as an ally. If you are in the recovery advocacy movement, or you are in the recovery movement, and there is information that is not possibly getting to people of color, to Black people in particular, be a conduit, and then nothing for us without us. Not only deliver the information to us, connect us to the information if we don't have it, and then step to the side and allow us to represent ourselves. I think that that's important. And here's another good thing. Listen. 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 Open up and listen. And when you hear something that makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself why. Why are you uncomfortable? There's so much reading to do. And again, this is a whole other panel. Chris, I see you shaking your head.
Oh, the only thing I was going to ask was it's already, someone already said it up there, is to do the work around this. Dr. Dawn Nickel, brilliant person. I love her to death. She puts a great resource up there and a lot of other just great insight. But yeah, I think that's just it. You do the work, you listen outside of the rooms, put your dollar into Black independent wealth. I think that is, again, a whole nother panel that we can discuss. But yeah, you want to care about Black lives, you create independent Black wealth. That's really what you do. But again, that's a whole other panel. But yeah, I just want to jump in and say that that's been answered, and it's been answered really well.
I'm going to thank y'all for saying this, but I'm going to hit it like this. Why do we have to always be until the unaffected are affected? Why does that have to be always the mindset in order to do change, right? Because that's how I'm looking at it. It seems to be that until the unaffected are affected. Simply like this. What would you do if it was your daughter, your niece, your mother, your uncle? What if it was your loved one? Attack it like that. Don't ask. You know, people kill me. You're intelligent. You have a brain. There's this thing called Google. When we all get hungry, we don't have no problem researching. When we all want something we want, we don't have no problem researching. So if you see a problem out here, do yourself a favor. Not only listen, not only do the work, but treat it as if it's your life. Treat it as if it's your loved ones. Then you'll attack it a little better.
Good stuff, guys. Another question. What is one action you would ask us who are listening to do support? What are you doing to support Black people in recovery?
I got weird because I say that again, please, so I can understand.
No, it was worded weird. It says, what is one question you would ask us who are listening to do support? What are you doing to support Black people in recovery? Okay, so what are you doing to support Black people in recovery?
I think she answered in the chat that she already had that question answered for her. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions, guys? Oh, what can we do to support the work that we're doing? Oh, okay. I understand.
Money. Money. I'm not joking. Money. If you want to, a lot of people do things under the guise of service work, and that's another whole other panel too, about how service work and work get conflated in the recovery world. But yeah, money is how you can actually put resources into Black communities and develop independent Black wealth, again, which is how generations are changed, is through that means. But that's just my 2 cents.
Now I'm gonna let you go last on this because I know you're gonna be just eloquent. I want to hit on what Chris said. So I'm reading a book right now called The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson, and he did the financial history of the British Empire, and he's doing it of the world right now. And what he's saying is, and what he found in his research is that the way things have moved, it has always been money has been behind that. And I will say this: I want people to think about this. After all those decades and years of slavery, where do you think that money went to? And how do you think that the world came to be the way it is today? Imagine if that wealth would have been spread right, how different things would be. That's how important wealth is, because it can literally dictate who's going to be in power, how long, when. So Chris, I love your point, because yes, and all the Black top autonomous right now are saying that. We need money. and not just some grant that you decide to sign off to a 501c and say, here, we're giving you 200,000. Oh, but make sure you show us exactly how you're spending that money, and make sure you show us exactly where that money's going to, and make sure you tag. No, I'm not talking about that money. I'm talking about give me a seat at the table on Wall Street. I'm talking about give me a seat at the table where I'm a Supreme Court judge, and not just one and not just two. I'm talking about really diverse. Yes, I love that point about money, because I want to know, can I please get some money back from that slavery? Please.
And I'll echo what the gentlemen are saying. Invest Black, support Black business, listen to Black experience. Support Black recovery, which means when we walk in the room, welcome us. Welcome me not as a token. Don't welcome me as a token. Don't tell me I'm not like the others. Don't embrace me while you're frigid to those who may not be as eloquent or articulate or have not interfaced as much. Be welcoming to me as a culture that's multidimensional. Remember that alcohol is no respecter, nor is addiction. And because I look different from you, and because I sound different than you, and because my experience, because I grew someplace differently, I grew up in a place that's different from where you were, does not mean that I didn't suffer the pain that you suffered. It doesn't in any way invalidate my recovery because it doesn't sound like yours or look like yours or whatever it may be. Ask us to come share our experience, strength, and hope in the rooms. Don't have me just as a token there. How about allow me to share my experience, strength, and hope with you, and support Black experience.
Great. So I'm going to wrap up. There's two questions that I see here, but they're very similar. What kind of organizations or institutions or resources do you guys trust that support, Black recovery in like mental health and substance abuse?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Go ahead, Freddie.
If I heard right, the organizations that support our communities, correct? Okay.
Correct.
So I'm a person, and Chris can probably hit to this more, but I'm a person where if you say you support, I look at your footwork in both money and I look at your footwork in both what you're actually doing to change policies. So I'm a person, I have it on right now. It's an Innocent Project shirt, okay? I see the work that they do. They are literally making sure that people that look like me aren't dying on death row because they've been wrongly convicted. They get my money easily because I see that they're saving lives. Also, with the news situation, I'm a person that I watch Frontline. I like Frontline's reporting. I like how they report. For me, I like what they do. Those are the institutions. Them are just two that I trust because everybody else is too watered down and it's too slanted for me to know. And a lot of institutions, what I learned this. They speak these languages that if you're not in those circles, you can't understand. So they say words that you might not know if you're not well read, right? So what I suggest to people is when you want to know about an institution, research. Everything about them is public knowledge. Find out where they put their dollars in and how they put that money in and what's on their board of directors, what they actually do in their diversity to actually help people, because that's the only way to know where to really put your money behind. And I've learned this, and I'll end with this. To say that you support our communities, that sounds good, but show me that by actually empowering those people in those positions to where they have a voice that can actually have things get done. So.
I'm going to just go left and just say if I have to tell you what it is, you probably don't need to donate to that. You need to go find someone in your community that has the same zip code as you and that is doing work around, again, criminalization of Black and brown people, that are doing things like testing and healthcare for people of color. All those small things, I think it's really great to go to the huge national organizations, but there is someone in your community that is a superwoman or superman, and they are doing real on the ground things like getting people registered to vote. And those are the people that you need to put your dollars behind. That's my 2 cents on it.
I concur.
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. We got a little over the time, but this is a very deep topic that you really need to go into detail with. So to wrap up, can you guys share like your social medias so then people who are in this chat can follow you and learn more about you guys and what you do?
Yeah, simple. Mine is www.themessagellc.com. It's The Message LLC. That's my website. Call me.
I'm Nyla Christian Life Inspired. You can find me on Facebook, and I'm also Life Inspired with Nyla on Instagram.
And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Sansbar, and my website is thesansbar.com. That's SANSbar.com.
It's really
Awesome.
clever, Chris.
Yeah.
Very
I'm a
clever.
LinkedIn guy too. I'm big on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn.
Sweet deal. So anything else to add, Callie?
It's the Sansbar, Callie. THE.
Oh,
That's all right. That's all right. I own that domain too, but it's the Sansbar.
okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank
No,
you.
I just want to say thank you so much, you guys. This was inspirational. I was getting such great feedback about it from everyone at Workit, watching it on Slack, and people on Facebook Live also watching it. So we appreciate you and your wisdom, and it was so awesome to listen to.
Callie,
Bless
thank
you.
you so much.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
guys.
you.
Humbling.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, can I take a screenshot of us together? I want to take a picture.
Yeah.
Smile for the camera. All right, I got it.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Chelsea.
much. And this
And
is
thank
recorded.
everybody.
Yeah, so we can send out a recording of it. I'll give it to you guys, and I'll make sure it's shared on our social. So
Thank y'all. History will shine bright on y'all.
Thank you so
and
much,
you.
all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bless you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everyone.